Hello, and thank you for joining me today on this episode. I am lucky enough to have my friend Susan Tucker here today. She has been in our lives,
2005.
years? Almost 20 years of friendship. Yeah, just being able to raise our kids together, talk and relate to each other on growing our families with God. And so today I want to ask her, which I do with everybody, where she sees God loving her and moving, and where she can feel him in her life and presence.
Thank you, Melanie. It's so nice to be here with you. So honored to be a guest on your podcast. So it has been a really full season in our life and my family's life. Coming out of the summer, it was one of those seasons that has held the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And in that, having encountered God in really different ways. The lows included my mom, who's 90 years old, breaking her leg. And so there was a long season of sitting bedside in the ICU and experiencing God in the stillness and the quiet of those spaces. And just feeling his presence and being loved just by being in a situation that felt very lonely, but because I was very aware he was with me, I did not feel alone in that. So that felt just so kind for him to give me an awareness of his presence with me in that dim ICU room with my mom. And then the highest of the highs, our oldest son got married the same month that this happened with my mom. And so just the capacity that we have to hold both suffering and joy at the same time, and kind of going into the wedding week with a doubt that my heart could hold both. And just God's presence to not only like assure me that I could hold immense joy in a time of deep suffering, but could be like wholeheartedly present for it. And it was such a profound time. I think the word that Tim and I land on more than any to describe it is transcendent joy for our family, celebrating our son's marriage with just our nearest and our dearest. And it was such a time of fun and joy and celebrating. We just felt God's presence in all of it. We've never considered ourselves a family of dancers. And I was just reflecting with my daughter-in-law this morning, what a surprising gift it was, the dancing, right? And just how good God was in that, like just uninhibited joy. And so I just felt God right there on the dance floor with us. Just so grateful for the season, grateful that we're on the other end of my mom's illness and she is doing well, has remarkably healed. And then just now being here in the town where my son and daughter-in-law live, watching them a few months into their marriage, and they're also thriving and doing well. And so just God's faithfulness and all of that the past season has held.
That's amazing. I love that you called it transcendent. It's such a word that's not used, but it does really explain a lot of, just in your own space and time of what you guys were going through. We did get the joy of being at the wedding, and the dancing was amazing. It was. Some of the best pictures actually came out of that. The dancing with you and your son, and your husband dancing with the bride, and just really fun, like circles of dancing and everyone just enjoying each other. It was beautiful. And that was amazing. So there was a conversation actually over that weekend that Susan and I realized that our stories have a very similar trajectory that happened but for both of us 20 years ago, almost for me, and a little over 20 years ago.
17 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. 17. Mine was also 17 years ago. 2006, fall of 2006. So almost 18. Yeah. Because Isaac just turned 16. Wow. Okay. That we both had toddler kids and kind of middle, elementary school kids, and found ourselves pregnant with our third child, but both had miscarried. And in our stories, how that has given us a different perspective on life, and real similar. Everyone's story, and even in that, is different, and everyone experiences it differently. So I wanted to invite Susan here to talk about something that is hard, but it is truth, and it is where God can really transform your heart and your mind with him. So Susan, I would love for you to kind of go back, explain that time, and when you found out you were pregnant, how old your other two were, and just start from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. So Tim and I actually had trouble conceiving our other two children. Seth, our oldest, we actually had to do fertility treatments to conceive him. And then Reed also was a journey to conceive him. So we never thought that we would just get pregnant. Like, that wasn't in the cards for us. And so after we had the two boys, we felt like our family was complete. And then surprisingly, when Reed was 5 and Seth was 8, in 2007, we discovered we were pregnant with our third child. And it was quite a shock, because we just never imagined that we had the capacity, that my body had the capacity to get pregnant without help. And by that point, Reed was in kindergarten and Seth was probably in 3rd grade. And so we were well into past the preschool days, past Mother's Day out. The kids were 5 days a week in school. My mama's heart had already transitioned past the idea of nurturing a baby and, that full-time mom in the way that you are with a baby. So it was quite a shock to just imagine that we were going to be starting that season again. And hard to wrap our heads around, but we did wrap our heads around it and began the anticipation of adding our third child to the family. About 8 weeks into the pregnancy, I went for just one of the routine exams, and they had trouble finding a heartbeat. So at that point, the doctors, of course, become very grim and said, come back tomorrow, with the expectation that they would be admitting me to have a DNC. And when we went back the next day, Tim went with me to the next appointment. There was a heartbeat. So we go to lunch and we're like, what is happening? Our hearts had been programmed for one thing to happen. We had been ready for this horrible loss. And then we get this news that the baby's still with us and the heartbeat was strong that day. And I think I remember at that lunch, us looking at each other thinking, well, this is happening. This is happening. We're having this baby. We just moved forward from that point with the expectation that in 7 months from then, the baby would be joining us. But then 4 weeks later, God in his mercy had, we were attending a marriage conference. And so God had arranged for the boys to be with my parents for the weekend. And we were at the marriage conference and I realized something was happening. So while Tim and I were attending this marriage conference, some things started happening with my body that alerted me that there was a problem. So we went to the doctor. I think we went to the ER that night, and the ER doctor did an ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. So we knew we had lost the baby. And then the doctor said it was the weekend. So he just suggested go home. Nothing's going to happen this weekend. And on Monday, come and see me. So we anticipated we would go home. The two of us would have, 48 hours without the boys to kind of process the loss before we had to go medically attend to this. And we went home. And during the night, I went into labor and delivered the baby at home. And so Tim was with me, and we delivered our third child at home. He was, or she, we don't know the gender, was 12 weeks. I was 12 weeks along in the pregnancy. And, it's terrible. It's a very traumatic experience. As I look back on that night, Tim was so present in a way that I remember being shocked, surprised by his not only presence of body, but presence of mind and spirit, just being so with me and so taking care of everything. Even to the point of knowing that he needed to keep me present to it. Like I just wanted to check out. Disassociation felt so tempting, and disassociation is a very familiar companion of mine because of some other past trauma I've had. So I can go there very easily. And so I just can remember Tim really almost coaching me through the night of like, because it's not quick. It's a long process, and him coaching me to stay with him and to stay with my body and to stay with the experience of what was happening, and just assuring me that I would be okay and he was taking care of me. And just, I can remember he's a very kind man and has a very calm voice at all times. And in that night, I can remember just his calm presence drawing me into the present moment with him. We labored throughout the night. Eventually, he had to call an ambulance to come because of blood loss. And so that's when our journey took us to the hospital, where the rest of the miscarriage and the follow-up care with the doctor happened. But then, the next morning, once they had attended to me, they sent us home. I remember being, cleaned up and tucked in bed. And the next day, my parents brought the boys back home, and, they had known we were expecting. So like the need to be their mom in that moment. So I stayed in bed, but I remember them crawling in bed with me and me just loving on them as best as they could at 5 and 8, feel what they needed to feel and comprehend what had happened to our family. And then I think Monday, somebody took the boys to school. And I remember having a few days of respite to stay in bed. But by midweek, I was back driving carpool. Yeah. I'm not even sure Tim got to midweek. I think Tim was back at work probably Monday. Life went on. And I think we were in church the next Sunday,
And so in that process that week, where was your head?
Yeah.
Do you even remember?
It was foggy. I can remember thinking the first couple of days just being very foggy, and my primary goal was when the boys were in the room with me to be alert and as normal as possible with them. And then when they would leave the room, which Tim was so kind to usher them out to watch SpongeBob and he'd fix their dinner, I would just be kind of catatonic again. But then I remember by Wednesday, and I don't remember if this was coaching by my mom of you have to get up and get going, or if it was just encoded in me as a mom, I have to get up and get going. Today I'm going to get up and I'm going to brush my teeth and I'm going to brush my hair and put on actual pants and an actual shirt. And then the next day I'm going to do those 4 things. And then I'm going to drive Seth to school and Reed to school. And then I'm going to come home and just lay on the couch. And then I'll get up and go pick them up and come back. So I remember almost having to coach myself through very specific steps of how to live again, how to move into my day again.
Thank you for sharing that. We do have similar stories, and I will go back to mine, which was my daughter was 2 at the time, my son was 4, and we weren't trying for a third. We had our hands full. We were on birth control. And so it was just shocking when I found out I was pregnant. I was like, okay, let's do this. I, got excited and I didn't mind. I never knew exactly if I wanted 2 or more, but God decided for me. So I started getting really excited, and we're going along and had my 4-week appointment, and everything was fine. It was right after I found I was pregnant. I got in. And then at 10 weeks, I started spotting and bleeding. And I never had that with the other 2. That was a really shocking experience to have that happen. So we ended up in the doctor's office, went into ultrasound first. The ultrasound tech didn't say anything, just did everything, and then said, hey, I got to go grab the doctor. I'll be right back. my husband and I, he was in there just looking at each other, and I, everything in me just freezes because it's that intuition that something's really wrong. Came back in and said, you lost the baby. It's actually probably lost it a couple weeks ago. It hasn't grown. So it's probably the size of maybe 7-week-old. So we can tell by that. We ended up in his office. This is all I remember. And a same thing, like my very soft-spoken husband steps in because he sees me like I'm done. I'm checked out. I'm bawling. I can't even get words out. Like him and the doctor start having the conversation of, what do we need to schedule? What does she need? And I was like, I have never seen you do this. I was like, whoa, okay. Like, I think he just knew, because after the fact, like, we realized that I had such an attachment. He hadn't had time to attach himself hormonally, physically to this person, and that he was able to just stay present and do everything for me. And I was really grateful. Ended up having a DNC 2 days later. I barely remember that. I think it was just shock at that point that this was happening. Like, I know you had a hard time like getting up and getting out. So I went the opposite, and I had to stay busy, and my mind had to stay busy. I painted my whole house. I mean, not just one room. I hand painted our whole, 3 bedrooms, living room, and kitchen in the next 2 weeks, because I had to have something to do. And that's how I cope, is that I need to stay busy. Not that I'm saying it's healthy. That was just what I did to process it. I just needed to stay busy physically. And as I was doing that, I think I processed some as well. What happened after that was I started getting a lot of anxiety, a lot of, okay, do we have a third? Do we not? God, what do you want? I'm not sure. And then my whole body just decided to have a hard time, which we also had a hard time getting pregnant. The first time, it took us 2 years. Second one was pretty easy. And then I think because of the anxiety and like trying to decide, I started not having my cycles and just really stressed out. And what I want to move into talking about. So that happened in October, and by March, I was an absolute disaster. I could not function. I had so much anxiety, depression, got into counseling, and I did end up on medication, because I couldn't think through anything. I couldn't take care of my kids well. I mean, I did take care of them, but I don't think I was real present. And that makes me really sad to think back now that I did miss out on being present. I mean, they were so little. They didn't understand what was going on. I will say, once I got on that medication, I was able to think through some stuff. Not against medication. It was great for the time. I was on it for, almost a year, because we gave God a year. So the difference in our stories is we ended up getting pregnant that December with Isaac, who came 9 months later. That was his answer for me, was that you should have the third baby. But in the meantime, it was my brain, my body, my trauma response was really, really hard. And I know we've talked about that some too. And just even being pregnant was hard again. And all the anxiety of what if, is this going to continue? Or am I going to have what's wrong with my body? I don't trying to relax my body. In the meantime, I'm like, my head's going nutty of trying to tell myself I'm okay. It's going to be fine. And we did, check on him a lot because of what had happened. We did share some of the post emotional stuff. How was that for you post months, year down the road?
It was interesting because when we were in the hospital, as the nurses and doctors were taking care of me, one of the nurses patted me on the shoulder and said, "Oh, don't worry, honey, you can try again." And I looked at Tim and he looked at me, and we both knew we don't want to try again. Like, we knew like this child was a gift from God, but nothing had like changed of like this drive to increase our family. Like, we knew this was a significant loss, and we had lost a very, like, a sweet gift of God, unexpected, unplanned, but so cherished and loved. But it didn't like flip a switch in me. And I was 37, so I was already like, I had already moved past like my childbearing years I thought were behind me. So I remember like that moment, like, no, I don't. I know she was being kind and trying to offer me hope in the best way that she could. But we knew when we left the hospital that day that we weren't going to start trying to have another child. And so, as I mentioned, like getting up, going to church the next Sunday, taking the kids to school, stepping back into what was a normal rhythm that we had established in the 5 and 8 years of being mom to these 2 boys. Just sadly, life went on because that's what I saw. You know, nobody in my world, and my my community was largely comprised of my faith community. Nobody talked about miscarriage. Nobody like shared about grief after miscarriage. There wasn't shared lament. So I just I didn't know how common it was for women to be miscarrying because we weren't talking about it. So I felt very much like an anomaly in the mix. And so I saw other women going about their lives. And so I just thought, well, this is what we do. So that's what I did. And so I picked up my old rhythms and continued those. And then one day I had dropped the boys off at school and gone to Target, as moms are prone to do, for their moment of like respite. You know, get your Starbucks, enjoy the white floors and the just, I don't know, what is it about the serenity of Target? But that was like my morning buzz, going to Target several mornings a week. And so I was waiting in line for my chai, a day unlike any other. And as I'm waiting for my chai, I looked at the cart in front of me, and there was a 2-year-old in the basket of the buggy. And it hit me like somebody had poured a bucket of cold water over me. And I don't know why that morning of all mornings, but I'm standing there thinking, I should have a 2-year-old in my cart. It was like an epiphany. I should have a 2-year-old in my cart. And it was almost like that fear. I don't know if you've ever like had the experience of losing your child in a department store. Utter like fear of like, where's my child? And I was standing at Starbucks thinking, I should have a 2-year-old in my cart. And my body just felt that utter panic of like, where's my baby? Like, where's my child? So I got my Starbucks and immediately went to my van and just started sobbing. And I had no idea what was happening. It really was like I had woken up to the fact that I had lost something significant. I remember just driving home, and I don't even know how that Target experience led me to the couch of a counselor, but it did, because I knew I'm not well. Like, I could not shake it off. Like, nothing could like soothe my nervous system. Not like the goodness of being with my boys, not the routine worship songs I was singing, not my women's Bible study, nothing was soothing my nervous system. I felt so activated, and I didn't have language back then to know what was happening, but I was completely dysregulated, and my nervous system was activated as if every nerve was firing simultaneously. And so I was just so uncomfortable in my skin. And somehow that led me to the couch of a therapist. And it wasn't the first time I had ever met with a therapist. A new therapist for me, and she was the right person to help me turn toward the loss, to name the loss, to risk grieving the loss. You know, I think I was terrified that once I started crying, it would not stop. Like, it was going to be just a deep well of grief that I would be alone in, and there would be no way to climb out of on my own. And so for her to like be with me in that and bear witness to it gave me a sense of safety and containment that I was able to enter finally into the emotions of the miscarriage in a way I hadn't for the 2 years, and actually permission to, like, not naming like these are unusual emotions or there's something wrong with you that you haven't gotten over it. Right? Like, for her to normalize, like, you've had a significant loss, like you have lost a child. And that's significant and is worthy of grief. My mind, body, and spirit were so disconnected because everything needed to come into like a harmony to grieve the loss of this baby. I just was moving ahead and pushing ahead to not allow that to happen. I think I didn't even know I was doing that. And so sitting on her couch with her presence offering me some containment allowed those three parts to like finally integrate and together to weep. And so it was a long season of like finally naming, I am depressed. Emotionally, I'm pretty blunted, checked out. I need some help. So not only therapy, but medication for that season to just help me to be able to come into some sense of being able to feel again. So it was a season of working with her, of taking the medication, of listening to my body, of welcoming the tears, of talking to Tim about the baby again, of like recognizing we have a third child, like to begin normalizing that in a way we hadn't in the 2 years. And so I will always remember that moment in Target, and I'm curious why that was the moment that the Lord was like, I think you're ready to go here, but I'm so grateful.
Well, I think you just said it.
Yeah, I was ready. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't until that moment.
Well, I think you just said it. I think you're ready.
I was ready. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it wasn't until that moment.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did the same thing in counseling it was almost, she did. She had me do it to the year of losing the baby. She wanted me to name the baby and write a letter. For some reason, I felt like it was a girl. I don't know. So I named her Avery and wrote this pages of how I felt about her. And yeah, it was that fear that if I do this, it's going to open the floodgates and I'm not going to be able to close them. This is something I'd never dealt with before. I'd never lost somebody. I've never dealt with grief like that. And my family had never either. So it wasn't comforting. I didn't find comfort. People didn't know what to do with me. I was really young. I mean, it just didn't make sense. And so I felt very lost in what to do and how to be. And of course, yeah, we do have words for it now of you're just so disconnected, heart, mind, body, spirit. And that was the first time that I knew what actual mourning and grief was when I got permission with somebody to go, you need to feel this and it's okay. And your body needs to release it and your heart needs to accept it and acknowledge it. I feel like any trauma situation, when you get healing, it's those acknowledging, permission, accepting, and you get through it. It took my husband years to really acknowledge how he felt about that and really put names and feelings to how he felt about that happening, to even use the name of Avery and his description of his feelings. The kids are fascinated that there's a brother or sister out there. When they were little, they're like, is it a girl or a boy? And I was like, maybe it's a girl. And so my daughter, who's the only girl, was like, I have a sister. So then I would start just crying, be undone. But to acknowledge that there's a life that we missed out on. And this will make me cry. My mom was dying of cancer, and she goes, I have a granddaughter, right? And I said, yeah. She goes, I'm going to find her. And like, it just brought it all back. That, yeah, she's in heaven. We'll see him again. We get to have that time.
No, I resonate with that when my dad was passing a few years ago. just very mindful of the people that would be there to welcome him. And I was very mindful that that would include the grandson or granddaughter he never knew. And my dad was a really good granddad. And so I was like, oh, that makes me so like happy that he's going to be there to be with her and whatever that looks like in the kingdom. Right. But like it even made like his passing so much easier because it was very hard, I think, for him to let go because of leaving my boys. But just to give him permission, like they're going to be okay. And guess who's waiting for you? Right. Right. And like, oh my goodness, even though he was non-communicative by that time, he loved being a granddad so much. I believe that in his spirit, he had something to look forward to.
Yeah. It's always a wonder in hindsight. Like we can talk about it now and see, I can relate to other women who are willing to share their stories. And we worked with a college program and I've stayed in touch with lots of them and have been able to share our story and come alongside them. And I'm like, Jesus, is this why? This why? I don't know. I feel like that's not the whole story, but when you go through loss and things like that, you just relate to people better when they go through similar things and you have an understanding and just kind of a silent connection of, I see you, I get it. And you learn what to say, what not to say, and just to be there for somebody without saying much. Curious if even through the years, what God's done with that part of your story.
It's interesting because I think it has been the experience of stepping into grief and almost welcoming grief without learning to welcome grief without fear. That he has used more than the particularity of the miscarriage. My miscarriage was the second traumatic loss I'd had in my life, but the first one, there was no one to say it's okay to grieve. And of course, this is awful. Like there was never a witness. There was never anyone to usher me into a better experience of like how to handle that traumatic loss. So my miscarriage was the first time I had ever experienced a traumatic loss where I actually had a companion on the journey to help me walk into the valley of the shadow and understand that there's no going around it. There's only going through it. While it's a hard journey, it will be harder if you do not traverse that Shadowland. With Jesus. Absolutely. And so it has become, I feel like God has like used that experience to almost make me a companion to other people going through traumatic loss. And I can remember when one of our dear friends died in her 30s, and I can remember being with all of her friends, and I was a decade older, and they're all looking at me like, what do we do? Almost like rescue us. And my answer was, I'll be with you in this. We have to stay here. We have to cry. We have to grieve. There's no going around this. Platitude I can give you that's going to take this away. There's no easy button I can hit that's going to like mend your heart and make sense of this for you. So we're going to be in this, but we'll be in this together. Like I'm not scared of that space because I've been in that space, and like to understand the gift it is to have somebody be with you in that space. I feel the holy honor it is to be with people in the ashes, and also like this is where the work is done.
Yeah, the timing of it all, you know, doing the work immediately or doing it 2 years later, you know, after it happens. God knows your timing. It's a lovely way to put it of you can't go around it. You got to be in it and find those people who will sit in it with you and will lament and pray and just be with you with the Holy Spirit. It's holy. It's a holy space to sit with somebody in their grief and just to be with them.
I think we're so scared of that. And I reflect on the time of losing the baby with such curiosity of why, especially within our faith community, it felt so lonely and we felt so isolated. And it is terrifying, right? It is so scary. What do we say? How do we offer? We can't fix this. I mean, it is scary terrain. I have found the value of like the ministry of just being present, not overcomplicating it, but being present with someone, being with someone, offering them my gaze, my time, my listening ear more than my words, my tears. Like, I think that is such a sacred offering. So sacred.
It is. It is. No, I love that. I love acknowledging that. If people have the opportunity to sit with somebody, just know, like, you don't have to even say much. Just even a hug, holding a hand, even cleaning, doing dishes, just being near them, sitting near them is sometimes all they need. And with no expectation that they have to be or do or come through, and just to be with them. It's amazing what you can learn.
Mm-hmm. I remember when that particular friend passed, the afternoon that I learned she had died, I was just home in the bed, and I heard somebody come in the house, and I just thought, I can't talk to anybody. I can't talk to any in our community who knew and loved her, because I'm just in my grief right now. And it was a friend of mine, and she just came in my bedroom and laid down on the bed next to me, and we just laid in the bed together. And I'll never forget that. She didn't need me to talk about how I was feeling. She didn't need to tell me how she was feeling, because she had lost a friend too, but she just could be with me. It's been 10 years, and I think back of that moment when that bedroom door opened, thinking, what is she going to require of me? And she required nothing. She just literally climbed onto the bed with me and laid there with me. And I think, okay, if I'm like, what are the top 10 gifts of my life? That would be in the top 10, because it was just, what a brave act of showing up for someone. Yeah. And then there was such mutuality in it, because we could just share that space together, and we both were laying there weeping. And I don't think a word passed. Yeah. And I think probably the only thing she said when she left was, I love you. And then she left. And I think that's the best care I have ever gotten in a season of grief, was just her showing up and entering in. It was just so beautiful.
It is. There isn't, the expectations, not many. You just want somebody to let you be, but to know you're still cared for, and just be in the space with you, or to come for somebody else. Most of the time they just want you to be there with them. So thank you for sharing your story. I know it's important to share how we grieve, how we lament, which is biblical. I do think sometimes it would be good to wear black. I've thought about this a lot, of how the Bible days they would wear black in their mourning, and it would tell people that they're mourning something, because if people don't know, they'll expect you to act or do or say certain things. And they have no idea you just had this great loss, because they probably don't know you well enough, which is fine. But man, if you had that acknowledgement of what you wear, you wouldn't have to say anything.
I also think about the cultures that when someone dies, they stop the clocks. And I think, wow, that's powerful. Like, I wish someone had stopped the clock, right? Like, you don't want to wrap your head around the fact life goes on in those moments, because it makes no sense. There's no rhyme or reason that life is going on. Why is my husband driving to work right now? Why are the boys at school? Why do I have to brush my teeth today? Why is life going on? And so I love the cultures who honor, for whatever time, stopping the clock, to just indicate the world as we knew it, or as we expected it, or as we dreamed it would be, has ceased. And for a moment, so we're just going to take a pause and recognize that and honor that. And I feel like that would have been such a generous gift, even if for a day, for everybody to just go, okay, we're just going to pause and honor that life is not going to go on the way we thought it was.
Yeah. Well, maybe you and I can adopt that for our friends and our community, and just try to encourage people. Take a day. Don't let Don't let anything else worry you. Just take a day. But we also have great community. We have a God who loves us. It is fearful of that situation, like you said. It's scary to sit in that. But we also have the promises of God. We get to move through, and we get to see them again and have that hope and have that love. Yeah. It's just a hope and a faith that this isn't where this story ends, right? I also want to ask you, I know I told you before, if you have any books or songs that have been moving you that are your favorites, and just explain those.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because in light of that question and what we were talking about today, I think my mind went to two books about grief that were really timely for me, one in particular. So when my dad was passing, this book was a particular comfort to me. It's a book by Francis Weller called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And it is beautifully written, and he talks a lot in it about ritual surrounding grief and loss. And it was a timely book for me of how do I remain very present for the death of my father, because it unfolded over the course of several days. How do I remain present for this and honor it with my whole self, mind, body, spirit, memory, but also the present tense. And Weller really gave me almost a guidebook for walking through those days with my dad. So that would be a book that I would recommend about grief. And then another one is written by a hospital chaplain, J.S. Park. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he has a lovely social media presence, and his Instagram is thoughtful and wise and deals with issues of grief and loss. And he sees it every day in his work as a chaplain. And he's written two books, and the second one is called As Long as You Need. Beautiful, and it is personal, and it is invitational about all the things that we've talked about today. I think people who are curious could start with maybe his Instagram to see if his voice resonates with them. He's very tender. Gosh, he is the most courageous man, just giving us an example of what it is to enter into seasons of death and grief and loss and lament with such courage. So J.S. Park, As Long as You Need, is another one that I love. And then the song that has been just coming up for me over the past year is an old song by Bethel, Revivals in the Air. It is just on my playlist on repeat. And I don't think I do any walks without ending with that song, because it's profound to me. Even just the melody alone and what it stirs in me moves me in ways that are, I want to say the word transcendent again. It really beckons me to hope and dream and have imagination for revival, in the sense of what it means to have new life and have a reawakening and have parts of our stories that we have either long forfeited or lost the hope that they could be resurrected. That song just stirs that in me. And there's one particular line in it where the person sings, "Lift your eyes to see, he's better than you dreamed, and everything you've lost, love is returning." I have to say, when that song and that lyric plays, I do carry in my heart our child, and I do carry in my heart my dad. And I carry in my heart my friend who passed, and all the people that we've lost. That line and just the melody of that song kindles my heart to hope. This is not a fairy tale. This is my reality, and their love will return them to me, or will return me to them. And there's such hope in that for me. And so I think that that's why my heart continues to gravitate to this song, because I need to be reminded often. Hope is hard for me. I'll just be honest. Faith is not hard. Hope is hard. And so this song just ushers me back into a felt sense of hope, and an imagination for hope. So that's the song that came to mind, Revivals in the Air.
That's beautiful. I love that song. When you know a song and then you read the line out of it, you're like, you get a full different view of the song when you actually listen to the words. And I love the beauty of music because it moves people. Depend on the song, depend on the words. It's just a beautiful tool to move the spirit within you. As we talk about the grief today, every time something happens to where I hear a story or I lose someone close to me, I always think about the thinning of the veil. I don't think they're very far away. I can feel heaven. Like, it's just when you're so close and you lose somebody you love, you still feel them. I think it's comforting for me to know that they're not far away and that it will be redeemed. This whole story will be redeemed in a new world with Jesus. And that's where my hope lies. That's where my faith lies. And it is the love returning, because he's going to return us all into the love story that he destined for us in the beginning. Can't wait. Cannot wait. It's going to be amazing. So thank you for sharing your heart, for sharing your story, for shedding some tears with me. Everyone has their stories for a reason. And I'm just, that we share a deep story in a little bit of a similar situation, but that we have an understanding and a piece of our heart in that way. And I hope and pray that whoever hears this can find some healing, can find just something that would help them think through it or pray through it and be with the Holy Spirit in a new way, and know that he is with us. He's always present. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Melanie.
We'll have to do this again.
All right.